The night was quiet on the Nevada back road. Too quiet. The Iron Saints, a brotherhood of bikers led by Jason, had stopped to rest when Rook, their loyal shepherd, froze, then began barking into the darkness like something out there was calling him. Moments later, they found it. Another shepherd, shot, bleeding, and wearing a GPS collar that shouldn't have been there. When Jason activated the signal, a single location flashed on the screen. Deep in the red desert, where no one lives, and where no one should. What was buried out there? A secret? A trap? Or a miracle waiting to be found? Don't scroll away. Subscribe now to follow the Iron Saints on a true journey of courage, loyalty, and the kind of brotherhood that can only be forged on the open road. The wind rolled low across the Nevada desert, dragging a long breath of dust and heat over the sleeping highway. The night was wide and hollow, a silver spine of asphalt stretching endlessly between the dying glow of two towns that had long forgotten each other's names. The only sound was the rhythmic growl of engines, 6 motorcycles cutting through the dark like a convoy of ghosts. At the head of the group rode Jason Mitchell, a man carved out of hard years and desert wind. In his mid-40s, Jason's face bore the rough geometry of survival. A strong jaw dusted with 2 days of stubble, a scar that traced from the edge of his left brow to his cheekbone, a thin white line gifted by shrapnel in Afghanistan. His eyes, the color of stormed steel, carried that quiet weight that soldiers never really lay down. Once a combat medic, now the leader of the Iron Saints, Jason carried his guilt like a passenger. His hands were steady on the handlebars, but somewhere beneath the leather and callus was the constant tremor of a man still hearing echoes of triage tents and last breaths whispered through sandstorms. The Iron Saints weren't an outlaw club. They were misfits of mercy, a band of veterans, truckers, mechanics, and wanderers who answered distress calls across the lonely highways of the Southwest. They patched up broken engines, pulled drunks out of ditches, and sometimes, when the desert decided to be cruel, found bodies so no one's mother had to wonder. Beside Jason, riding an old Harley with a flame-worn tank, was Sarah Torres, mid-30s, a former firefighter whose laughter once filled New Orleans bars before the storm took her home, and half her courage. She was lean and sharp-eyed, her dark hair braided tight under her helmet, her jacket stitched with a small patch that read, "Still Standing." Behind her rode Vic Ramirez, the group's mechanic, barrel-chested, hands blackened by years of engines and cigarette smoke, a man who spoke less than his machines but always first to throw a wrench when someone needed fixing. And then there was Rook. The German shepherd rode in the sidecar of Jason's bike, a creature of amber eyes and quiet vigilance. At 7 years old, he was still built like iron, 85 pounds of muscle wrapped in gray-black fur that shimmered under the moonlight. Rook had served as a K-9 in the Marines, sniffing explosives, finding lost soldiers, and once dragging his handler, Jason himself, from the wreckage of an overturned Humvee. The two had been inseparable ever since, bound by something deeper than training, the understanding of men and beasts who had seen death up close and decided to defy it together. The night was calm until it wasn't. Rook lifted his head, ears slicing through the air. His growl was low at first, more vibration than sound. Jason frowned, cutting the throttle slightly. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. The dog barked once, sharp, then again, urgent, commanding. Sarah's voice crackled through the helmet radio. "He smells something?" Jason's gaze swept the horizon. Nothing but black sand and stars. Then a glint, faint, metallic, just beyond the reach of the headlight, a flash of red against the dust. Rook barked again, loud enough to drown the engines. Jason braked hard, gravel screaming under the tires. The convoy slowed, engines idling in uneasy harmony. When the light beam found its mark, the desert seemed to exhale. There, half-collapsed beside the asphalt, lay another German shepherd, older and smaller than Rook, its fur matted with blood and dirt. One paw twitched weakly. Around its neck, a torn collar blinked with a single red light, a GPS tracker. Jason slid off his bike, knees sinking into the dust. "Easy, easy," he whispered, reaching out. The dog flinched but didn't growl. It was too weak for anger. Jason's medic instincts kicked in, steady breathing, trembling pulse, a wound through the shoulder where a bullet had grazed bone. Sarah knelt beside him, flashlight trembling in her hand. "Who the hell shoots a dog out here?" Vic grunted. "Maybe someone wanted it gone before it found something." Jason ran his hand along the collar, wiping away grime until the brand appeared. A small, unfamiliar logo, and under it a serial number. The tracker's light blinked again, steady and precise, like a heartbeat. He pressed the side button, and the device flickered to life. A single coordinate appeared on the tiny, cracked screen, glowing in cold blue. 37°115°. Jason recognized the numbers instantly. "That's out by the Red Hollow Basin," he said, voice low. "Nothing out there but sand and old mines." Rook whined softly, leaning closer to the wounded shepherd. The dog turned its head, nose touching Rook's muzzle for a brief, trembling moment, as if passing something between them. A scent, a memory, a plea. Jason's stomach tightened. He had seen that look before, on soldiers who'd lost their partners. The dying always had a way of asking for help without words. The old shepherd gave a final shudder, then went still. The desert swallowed the silence. No one spoke for a while. Only the wind carried a thin whisper across the sand, brushing over the dog's fur like a farewell. Jason closed its eyes gently, then took the tracker and stood. Dust clung to his boots, to his thoughts. Sarah said softly, "We should call it in." Jason shook his head. "There's no one to call. That coordinate's not random." Vic frowned. "You think someone sent it here?" Jason looked down the dark road, the direction the dog had come from. "No," he said. "I think someone wanted it found." Rook let out a low bark, not of fear but readiness. His body leaned toward the open desert, nose pointing where the signal led. Jason felt that old weight return, the instinct that once told him to run toward gunfire when others ran away. He crouched beside Rook, resting a gloved hand on the dog's shoulder. "You feel it too, huh? Someone's still out there." He turned to his crew. "Gear up. We follow the signal." Sarah blinked, incredulous. "At this hour? Jason, it's 2 a.m. That's 40 miles of nothing." Jason's jaw tightened, voice calm but absolute. "That dog crawled all the way here with a hole in its chest to bring this. I'm not letting that be for nothing." Vic looked at the empty highway ahead, then sighed, nodding. "Well, hell, guess we're the kind of fools who chase ghosts." The group mounted their bikes again. Engines roared alive, slicing through the stillness. Jason fixed the GPS to his handlebars. The soft blue arrow blinked steady, pointing east, into the vast red wilderness where night had teeth. As they rolled out, Rook sat upright in the sidecar, eyes locked forward, wind cutting through his fur. Jason glanced down at him, that old scar across the dog's muzzle catching the light. They had walked through worse fires together, but something about this felt different, heavier, older, like the echo of a promise neither of them had made, but both were bound to keep. The desert closed behind them. The dead dog's body lay in the moonlight, motionless, while the faint hum of the tracker's lost signal blinked one last time, then went dark. Ahead, the wind rose again, carrying dust and the smell of distance. Jason twisted the throttle. The Harley roared, and the Iron Saints disappeared into the horizon, chasing a coordinate that would lead them straight into the center of darkness. And as the first tremor of dawn hinted beyond the far mesas, Jason whispered to himself through the wind, "If someone needs help out there, we don't turn away." Rook barked once, sharp, certain, as if answering yes. The engines howled in unison, a prayer made of noise and motion, as the road swallowed them whole. By the time they reached the coordinates, dawn was crawling over the desert, pale and ghostly, like a candle trying to light a cathedral. The wind had changed, carrying with it the smell of burnt wood and rust, the breath of something long dead but not forgotten. The Iron Saints rolled down a dirt road pocked with potholes and scattered bones of old vehicles. What appeared at the end of it wasn't a camp so much as a scar on the earth, a collection of crooked shacks, broken cages, and a gutted sign that once read, "Ridge Hollow Game Reserve." The letters now hung by single nails, squeaking against the wind like a dying animal. Jason cut the engine and listened. The desert was quiet again, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind that hid breathing. Rook jumped out of the sidecar, nose twitching, tail stiff like a compass needle. The dog moved ahead in cautious steps, the way soldiers do when they remember where landmines used to be. Jason followed with a flashlight and his revolver, his boots crunching over the glass and ash that blanketed the ground. Sarah surveyed the perimeter, her eyes narrow beneath her helmet visor. "You sure this place is empty?" she asked. "Empty doesn't mean safe," Jason said, his voice a rasp. Vic walked toward what was left of a barn. The man's wide shoulders filled the doorway as he pushed through a curtain of cobwebs. "Looks like someone left in a hurry," he called out. "Still warm ashes here." He bent down, brushing at a pile of burned paper and half-melted plastic. "And this was no hunting camp. Look at the wiring, the cameras. Someone was watching something." Jason entered the main cabin. The smell hit him first, a sour blend of old meat, gasoline, and bleach. His flashlight danced across walls peppered with hooks, chain links, and tattered tarps. On a table lay a stack of ID cards, men, women, all with the same faded blue stamp of a nearby border town. His stomach tightened. It wasn't the first time he'd seen the aftermath of cruelty, but it never dulled. Rook's bark broke the stillness. Sharp. Urgent. Jason turned just in time to see the dog pawing at a wooden floor panel near the corner of the room, whining and scraping as if something underneath was breathing. Jason dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to the boards. A faint sound, ragged, terrified breathing. "Sarah! Vic! Over here!" he shouted. They pried the plank loose, revealing a hidden hatch with a rusted handle. Jason wrenched it open, and the desert exhaled something human. From the shadows below, two frightened eyes blinked up. A girl, thin as wire, hair matted with dirt and fear, wrists bound with duct tape. Hey, it's okay," Jason said, lowering himself halfway down. "We're not the ones who hurt you." Her voice cracked like dry leaves. "They'll come back," she whispered. "They always come back at night." Her name, they learned later, was Lily, 17 years old, with tangled auburn hair and freckles that would have looked like stars if her face hadn't been so pale. Her clothes were ripped, her skin smeared with dust and bruises, but her eyes, wide gray blue, still held a fierce spark, the kind that doesn't surrender even after the world tries to crush it. Jason cut the tape from her wrists. "You're safe now," he said, but even he didn't fully believe it. Lily clutched his jacket, trembling. "They said they were hunters. Night hunters, they called themselves. But they weren't hunting animals. They were taking people, moving them at night. Some they brought back, some— She stopped, her throat closing. Sarah put a hand on the girl's shoulder, soft but firm. "You're okay, sweetheart. You're safe." Vic's flashlight caught something on the far wall. A symbol burned into the wood, a circle split by 2 wings and a sword. He frowned. "Jason," he said quietly, "this look familiar to you?" Jason's gaze landed on it and froze. The world tilted slightly. That mark, once embroidered on the back of a leather jacket, black and gold, had been his. The old emblem of the first Iron Saints, back when they weren't saints at all, when they were just men riding for rage and reputation. He'd buried that past 15 years ago, after the fights, the drugs, the prison nights. But here it was, seared into the bones of a place where people were chained. "Could be coincidence," Sarah said, watching him carefully. "Yeah," Jason muttered, his tone hollow. "Coincidence." But deep down he felt the cold sting of recognition, the way his choices had rippled out long after he'd tried to wash them clean. A sudden metallic click echoed from outside. Rook's ears shot up. The dog barked once, low and sharp. "Lights off," Jason hissed. They doused the flashlights and crouched low. Through a cracked window, Jason saw headlights approaching. Not cars, but motorcycles, their beams cutting through the dust like white blades. "Hell," Vic muttered. "Looks like the hunters came back early." Jason grabbed Lily's hand. "Basement now," he whispered. "Go." Sarah guided the girl down into the hatch while Rook pressed against the door, growling. The engines outside died one by one. Silence. Then footsteps. Jason peered through the gap in the window slats. 6 men, black leather jackets, helmets with mirrored visors. One of them held a rifle slung low, casual like a habit. Another dragged a chain along the ground, letting it scrape metal against dirt. Jason's heart beat slow and measured, soldier rhythm. Fear was a tool. Panic was death. He motioned to Vic to circle left, to Sarah to cover the back. The first of the strangers stepped into the cabin's yard. He was tall, thick-shouldered, moving like someone who believed the world owed him silence. When he lifted his helmet, the firelight from a cigarette caught his face, square-jawed, scar across the chin, eyes like 2 coins of burnt copper. He looked around and said, voice calm, "Where's the dog? The black one." Jason froze. Whoever these men were, they weren't looking for just anyone. They were looking for Rook. Vic whispered, "They know your dog?" Jason didn't answer. His mind worked fast. If they knew Rook, then this wasn't random. Maybe Rook's old military ID, maybe someone tracking him, or maybe something worse, a ghost from Jason's own past that had just found a leash. He raised his gun slowly. "We're moving," he whispered. "Now." Sarah nodded. Vic grabbed his wrench, his weapon of choice, and kicked open the back door. Rook leaped first, muscles tensed, vanishing into the desert like a streak of smoke. Jason followed with Lily, half carrying her. The engines roared back to life as bullets snapped through the air, shredding sand. The Iron Saints raced toward the eastern ridge, the camp shrinking behind them, now a nest of fire and chaos. Jason didn't look back. He didn't have to. The mark on that wall was enough to tell him what waited behind them, and what might be waiting ahead. As the horizon swallowed the last trace of the Ridge Hollow camp, he shouted over the wind, "Hold on, Lily! We're not done yet!" Rook barked once, sharp and defiant, running ahead through the rising storm of dust, guiding them away from death, and unknowingly straight toward it. The desert sun was bleeding into the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of amber and rust. The Iron Saints rode through that dying light with their engines growling low, dust billowing like smoke behind them. The storm that had begun as a whisper now roared across the plain, a wall of wind and grit that devoured the landscape in slow, merciless waves. Jason Mitchell led the pack, his jaw locked tight, one hand steady on the throttle, the other gripping the handlebars of his Harley, as if the road itself might vanish beneath him. In the sidecar, Rook sat upright despite the shaking, his fur flecked with sand, his amber eyes fixed ahead. The wound on his hind leg was freshly bandaged, dark patches of blood seeping through. Yet his posture was unbroken, the stance of a soldier refusing rest. Beside them, Lily clung to Sarah on the second bike, her fingers white-knuckled on the woman's jacket, her hair whipping like copper thread in the wind. The fear in her eyes hadn't faded since they'd pulled her from that hellish pit, but now it mingled with disbelief. The disbelief of someone suddenly thrust from one nightmare into another. Jason checked the rearview mirror out of habit. The road behind them shimmered with heat and dust, empty for now. But the unease gnawed at him. The hellhounds. The name hit him like a cold knife every time he thought it. Once they were his brothers, men who had followed his lead back when Iron Saints wasn't a charity club, but a gang of ghosts on wheels. When Jason left the old life, the hellhounds stayed, carving their own legacy from the bones of his mistakes. He had buried that past beneath years of service, good deeds, and silence. But now, the ghosts were coming to collect. Vic's voice crackled through the comm radio. "Storm's closing fast. Visibility's tanking." "Keep formation," Jason replied. "We push through the ridge. Should hit the old rail town by sundown." But fate doesn't wait for safe ground. It chooses its moment like a snake striking from shadow. From behind them came the sound, a rising thunder that didn't belong to the storm. Engines, a dozen at least, maybe more. Jason's gut turned to stone. He twisted the mirror again, and this time the desert glared back with eyes of fire, headlights, lined in formation, cutting through the dust like a swarm of angry hornets. "Company," he muttered. Sarah heard it too. "That's not rescue, is it?" Jason's eyes hardened. "No, that's family." The roar grew louder. In seconds, the hellhounds burst through the wall of sand, a convoy of black leather and steel, their jackets emblazoned with a snarling skull engulfed in fire. Jason could almost hear the echo of his own voice from years ago teaching them formation riding, discipline, the brotherhood code. And now those same rhythms beat against him like war drums. At the front of their pack rode Harlan Briggs, the hellhound's leader, tall, broad, with shoulders like granite and eyes that burned a rusted gold. His beard was streaked with gray, not from age but from years of smoke and whiskey. Once he had been Jason's right hand, the man who could fix any engine and break any man. But after Jason's departure, Harlan had rebuilt the crew into something darker. He rode a matte black Triumph with red flames licking its tank, his face set in a permanent scowl carved by betrayal. Harlan's voice cut through the static of the storm, amplified by a throat mic. "Well, I'll be damned. The prodigal medic rides again. Thought you'd gone soft, Jason?" Jason didn't answer. His fingers tightened on the throttle. The storm howled louder, sand slicing against his goggles. The hellhounds closed in from behind like wolves encircling prey. One of them, a thin man with tattoos curling up his neck and a smile too wide for his face, fired a warning shot. The bullet whistled past Jason's shoulder, shattering his side mirror. Vic barked through the comm. "We're outnumbered, boss." "Then make it count," Jason replied. "Ride smart, not scared." They veered off the highway onto a dirt track that wound between dunes. The wind clawed at them, and visibility dropped to near zero. But Jason knew this stretch of land. He'd ridden it drunk, high, blind, and once in a hail of bullets. Every turn was muscle memory. Harlan's men followed, engines snarling, their headlights flickering like ghost lights. One of them pulled up alongside Sarah's bike, grabbing at Lily's arm. The girl screamed, kicking out, but the man's grip was iron. Before Jason could react, Rook leaped from the sidecar in a blur of gray and teeth. The impact knocked the attacker sideways. The dog clamped his jaws around the man's forearm, dragging him off balance. His bike skidded, spiraled, and erupted into flame as it hit the sand. The hellhounds behind swerved, cursing, dodging the wreckage. "Rook!" Jason shouted, cutting his speed to pull alongside the struggling dog. Rook limped back toward the sidecar, his hind leg bleeding again, but his eyes gleamed fierce and alive. "Good boy," Jason murmured, hauling him back in. The group pressed on, adrenaline burning through exhaustion. The sandstorm reached its peak, a curtain of chaos. The world turned beige and soundless, except for the pulse of engines and the roar of blood in Jason's ears. Then, through the maelstrom, something loomed ahead. A church, or what was left of one. Its white paint peeled away, leaving ribs of weathered wood. A crooked cross clung to its steeple. Once, it had been a chapel for drifters and truckers. Jason remembered stopping here years ago when he still believed in redemption through silence. "This way!" he shouted. They broke through the last gust of sand and barreled into the churchyard. Jason and Vic braced their bikes against the wall, dragging Lily inside. Sarah kicked the heavy door, shut, locking it with an old steel bar. The wind outside screamed like something alive. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memory. Wooden pews lay splintered. A rusted organ sat against the wall, its keys cracked, silent as bones. Candle stubs melted long ago, left wax like dried tears along the altar. Lily sat trembling beside the pulpit, hugging herself. "They'll come," she whispered. "They won't stop." Jason crouched beside her, trying to keep his voice steady. "Then we'll make them wish they did." Rook limped to his side, pressing against his leg. Jason stroked the dog's fur gently, feeling the tremor beneath his touch. He knew that look. Rook would keep fighting until there was nothing left of him. So would Jason. Through a cracked stained glass window, headlights appeared, the hellhounds encircling the church. Their engines idled low, a growl of waiting wolves. Harlan dismounted first, standing in the stormlight like a figure carved from vengeance. His voice echoed across the wind. "You could have stayed gone, brother, but you had to come dragging ghosts back with you." Jason stepped to the doorway, revolver in hand. "You took our name, Harlan. You turned it into poison." Harlan smirked. "You left it to rot. I just made it honest." Lightning flared behind him, turning his face into a mask of scars and shadow. For a long moment, neither man moved, two sides of the same coin flipped by fate. Then, as thunder rolled, Jason said quietly, "I thought I'd outrun the dark. Turns out it rides too." Rook growled beside him, low and steady. The storm swallowed their voices, leaving only the sound of engines rumbling like judgment. Inside the church, beneath the broken cross, the iron saints prepared to face their ghosts. Night fell like a curtain of ash over the desert, swallowing the church in shadows and sand. The storm outside howled through broken shutters, rattling the pews and shaking loose flakes of old paint from the ceiling. The air smelled of dust, gun oil, and the faint metallic tang of fear. Jason Mitchell crouched by the altar, loading shells into his revolver. The motion mechanical, steady, the rhythm of a man who'd done this too many times before. Rook lay beside him, chest rising and falling in short, uneven breaths. The shepherd's bandaged leg was soaked again, dark with fresh blood, but his eyes stayed sharp, molten amber catching every flicker of candlelight. Each gust of wind made him lift his head, listening for movement outside. He was wounded but still a soldier, refusing rest. Sarah Torres stood near the door, rifle propped against her shoulder. The candlelight etched her face into angles of determination, jaw tight, eyes fierce. The firefighter's composure that once faced infernos now stared down armed bikers without blinking. Vic Ramirez checked the windows, his massive frame barely fitting between the cracked pews. He had found an old hunting shotgun hanging behind the pulpit and was cleaning the rust from its barrel with the corner of his shirt. His lips moved soundlessly. Not a prayer, just counting. Vic always counted when he was scared. Jason pressed the radio button on his vest. "Breaker 1-9, this is Mitchell of the Iron Saints, requesting immediate response. We're under attack at the Ridge Hollow Chapel. Coordinates." Static cut him off, shrill and useless. The desert had swallowed the signal whole. Outside, engines idled low, the hellhounds sound a growling symphony under the wind. Shadows moved beyond the cracked stained glass, tall, heavy shapes circling the church like wolves around a campfire. Then, from the dark, came a voice. Gravel wrapped in smoke. "Well," it said, calm and cutting, "the saints finally found their altar." Harlan Briggs stepped into the yellow cone of a headlight. His black jacket gleamed with fresh oil. The emblem of a flaming skull stretched across his back like a brand. The years had hardened him further, face carved in cruel lines, beard thick and salt gray, hair tied back in a short, rough tail. His right hand bore a burn scar that snaked down to his wrist, a souvenir from the fire that ended their brotherhood years ago. He grinned, a smile too wide to mean peace. "Jason Mitchell," he called out, voice echoing against the church walls. "The man who left his pack to play preacher." Jason peered through the slit in the door, gun raised but steady. "You're trespassing on holy ground, Harlan." "Holy?" Harlan laughed, slow and cold. "You built this church on bones, brother. You think you can ride away from sin? It rides behind you." The other hellhounds laughed, spreading out, the sound drowned by the wind. One of them, a thin man with a scar splitting his lip, smashed a bottle and tossed it toward the church. Glass shattered, flames licking up near the wall. Sarah cursed under her breath. "They're trying to smoke us out." Jason turned to Vic. "Watch the back entrance. Don't shoot till I say." Vic nodded, eyes hard. They picked the wrong saints tonight. Rook barked once, ears sharp. A second later, a bullet tore through the stained glass above the altar, scattering colored shards across the floor like rainbows breaking apart. The firefight began. Jason returned fire, aiming by instinct. The flash from his revolver lit his face, that same cold, precise calm from his soldier days. Sarah's rifle cracked sharp and fast, knocking one biker off his feet as he charged the front steps. The sound of gunfire mixed with the storm, thunder made of man and machine. Lily huddled beneath the pews, arms wrapped around herself. Her small frame shook, not from cold, but from the memories clawing their way up. The cage, the chains, the hands that took her freedom. Rook limped toward her, pressing close, his warmth anchoring her to the present. She buried her face in his fur, whispering words that got lost in the noise. Outside, Harlan ducked behind a motorbike, lighting a cigarette with a calm that didn't belong in a gunfight. He raised his voice again. "You always said we were brothers, Jason. Brothers share everything, even hell." Jason ducked behind the altar, reloading. The cross above him swayed on its chain, clinking against the wood. You stopped being my brother the day you traded souls for speed." "Funny," Harlan replied, stepping forward into the light. "I remember you pulling the trigger first." The words hit Jason harder than any bullet. A flash, fire, an explosion. The night their old clubhouse burned. He'd saved lives that night, but he'd left Harlan behind. That scar on the man's hand? It was Jason's doing. The guilt flared again, but there was no time to bleed over the past. Another round of gunfire ripped through the wall. Vic grunted, taking a graze across his arm. "They're flanking the back," he shouted. Jason pointed. "Sarah, with me. Vic, hold that side." They moved like a unit, practiced, wordless. Jason kicked open the side door and fired 2 rounds. One hit a bike tire, another clipped a shooter's shoulder. The man screamed, collapsing. Harlan's crew scattered for cover. But when Jason turned back inside, time froze. Harlan had slipped through the chaos, stepping through the broken front doorway, pistol drawn. The man's eyes gleamed amber under the candlelight, reflections of madness and something that still looked like memory. He raised the gun, sight trained not on Jason, but on Lily. "Old debts," Harlan said softly. "They never die easy." Jason shouted, "Don't!" But the gun went off, and then movement, fast, raw, unstoppable. Rook lunged. The bullet tore through the air, meant for the girl, but struck fur and flesh instead. The shepherd crashed into Harlan, jaws locking on his arm, dragging him backward with the weight of fury. Harlan roared, firing again, but the second shot went wild. Jason took aim and pulled the trigger once. The echo was deafening. Harlan's body hit the floorboards, eyes wide open, smoke curling from the pistol in his dead hand. Jason dropped beside Rook immediately. The dog lay still, chest heaving, a red bloom spreading across his side. Lily scrambled out from under the pew, hands trembling. "No, no, please!" Jason pressed his hands to the wound, his voice breaking. "Stay with me, buddy. You've done enough. Stay." Rook's eyes flicked to him, soft and knowing. His breath rattled once, twice, then quiet. For a moment, the world went silent, the kind of silence that makes you realize you've lost something holy. Sarah stood frozen by the doorway, weapon lowered. Vic stepped in, blood on his sleeve, face ashen. "It's over," he said, though his voice didn't sound convinced. Jason looked down at Rook, tears mixing with the dust on his cheeks. "Yeah," he whispered, "it's over." The storm outside began to fade, its fury spent. Candlelight flickered against the altar. The silver cross above swayed once more, drops of blood from Rook's wound splattering onto its base, red against the dull metal like the final seal of a covenant. Jason reached out, touching the dog's fur one last time. "Rest easy, soldier." The wind pushed open the broken door, carrying sand through the church. It swept over Harlan's body, over the cracked pews, over the blood at the cross, cleansing or condemning, no one could tell. And in that breath of quiet, beneath the flicker of dying light, it almost sounded like the desert was whispering a prayer for them all. The night after the gunfire felt endless. The wind had died, but silence took its place, heavy, absolute, like the desert itself was holding its breath. Inside the shattered chapel, the air was thick with the smell of smoke and blood. The candles had burned down to puddles of wax, and the flickering light painted strange shadows across the cracked walls. Jason Mitchell sat near the altar, his back against the cold wood, Rook's head resting on his lap. The German shepherd's breathing came in shallow, stuttering waves, his chest rising only because Jason willed it to. Jason's hands were pressed over the wound, soaked through with crimson that refused to stop spreading. Rook's fur was damp, darkened by blood and dust. His once sharp ears now drooped slightly, but his eyes, those burning amber eyes, still watched Jason with a soldier's calm. Every rise of his chest was a quiet defiance of death. Jason brushed his hand gently through the dog's fur, whispering, "You're not done yet, not tonight." Sarah sat across the room, rifle laid beside her, her face half hidden in shadow. Her braid was undone, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. She had been through fires before, real ones, the kind that melt steel and test faith. But this night felt worse. There was no flame to fight, no hose to aim, just waiting. "He needs a vet," she said quietly. "He won't make it till morning." Jason didn't look up. "There's no vet within 50 miles. And if there was—" His voice faltered, the words breaking apart. "He doesn't trust anyone else." Vic Ramirez, his arm wrapped in a blood-stained cloth, crouched by a broken window. He was working the old radio with tools he'd pulled from his bike, wires, duct tape, even a lighter to melt the frayed ends. Sweat ran down his temples, carving streaks through the dust on his face. He was built like a tank, but his hands moved with surprising gentleness, the hands of a man who'd fixed more hearts than engines without ever realizing it. "Give me a second," he muttered. "Signal's weak as hell, but I think I can catch a frequency if the storm's moved north." Lily sat on the steps near the altar, her knees pulled to her chest. The girl hadn't spoken since the shooting. Her pale face looked smaller in the candlelight, freckles dimmed under the weight of shock. She kept her eyes on Rook, biting her lip until it bled, as if punishing herself for surviving. Every time Jason looked at her, he saw a child trying to rebuild trust in a world that had burned her. Minutes stretched. The wind pushed through the broken doorway, carrying whispers of dawn. Vic smacked the radio once, then again. Static gave way to a faint voice. "This is Highway Patrol out of Tonopah. Identify yourself." Jason looked up sharply. "This is Mitchell, Iron Saints. We've got casualties and multiple hostiles down at the Ridge Hollow Church. We need immediate medical response and law enforcement backup." "Copy that, Mitchell. Hold position. ETA. 45 minutes. Stay put." Jason lowered the mic slowly. The words should have brought relief, but they didn't. 45 minutes might as well have been eternity. Rook shifted, a low whine rumbling deep in his throat. Jason felt it like a knife. He pressed his forehead against the dog's, voice breaking into a whisper. "You've saved more people than any man I've known, Rook. More than me. More than all of us." His mind flickered to the battlefield. The burning Humvee. Rook dragging him through sand while mortars fell like rain. The dog had lived his whole life rescuing the broken. Soldiers, strangers, children, always giving, never asking. Jason swallowed hard. "If this is your last fight, you won it." Outside, the clouds shifted, and the faintest hint of dawn brushed the horizon, a pale silver wound in the dark sky. Sarah leaned against the wall, staring at it. "You ever notice," she said softly, "that the desert smells different before rain?" Vic glanced over his shoulder. "Rain? In Nevada?" He managed a weak smile. "Now that would be a damn miracle." Jason didn't reply. His eyes stayed on Rook, who was breathing slower now, each inhale a struggle, each exhale a whisper. Lily crawled closer, her voice barely audible. "He saved me," she said. "He didn't even know me, and he saved me." Jason's hand trembled as he stroked the shepherd's head. "That's what he does," he said. "That's who he is." The storm outside was gone, leaving an unnatural stillness. The desert seemed to hold its breath one final time before the rain began, soft at first, a few drops tapping against the broken windows. Then it grew, a steady rhythm against the roof, washing away the soot and sand. The smell filled the church, clean and raw, like the earth had been waiting for absolution. Rook lifted his head slightly, as if to listen. Jason could see the reflection of the rain in his eyes, a glimmer of something peaceful. The dog's chest rose once more, then fell. He exhaled slowly, a sigh that sounded like relief. Jason froze, waiting for the next breath that didn't come. The silence that followed was total. No thunder, no wind, no heartbeat but his own. He felt something collapse inside him. He bowed his head, pressing his hand to Rook's chest. "Rest easy, soldier," he whispered, the words shattering in his throat. Sarah turned away, hiding her tears behind her hand. Vic bowed his head, mumbling something that might have been a prayer, though he'd never admitted to believing in God. Lily sat motionless, her eyes wide and empty, until finally she reached out and touched Rook's paw, whispering, "Thank you." By the time the sirens appeared on the horizon, small blue lights flickering through the gray dawn, the rain had already soaked through the earth, turning the dust into dark mud. Jason carried Rook's body outside, the dog's weight heavy but familiar in his arms. The first light of sunrise crept over the hills, catching the wet metal of the church's broken cross, making it gleam like polished silver. A police officer approached, a middle-aged man named Deputy Harris, tall with a kind but weary face, streaks of gray in his close-cut hair. He spoke gently, the way men do when they've seen too much loss. "Sir, are you the one who called it in?" Jason nodded, his voice low. "Yeah, it's over now." Harris looked past him, taking in the broken bikes, the bodies of hellhounds lying in the sand. "Hell of a night," he murmured. "You did what you had to." Jason didn't answer. He just looked down at Rook, wrapped in his old jacket. The rain ran down his face, mixing with the dirt and blood, washing both away until there was nothing left but salt. As the medics lifted Lily into the ambulance, she turned back, eyes red, voice trembling. "Will he be buried here?" Jason looked toward the horizon where the desert met the sky, endless, quiet, and clean. "Yeah," he said softly. "He'll stay here. He earned it." The rain kept falling as the officers loaded the surviving hellhounds into their vehicles. The desert smelled of metal and sage. Sarah placed a hand on Jason's shoulder, silent but strong. When the last siren faded, the church stood alone again, surrounded by the hush of new rain. Jason knelt once more beside the shallow mound he'd dug just outside the door. He placed Rook there gently, his hands shaking as he covered the body with earth. Each handful felt like giving away a piece of himself. When he was done, he sat back, staring at the wet horizon. The storm clouds were breaking, light piercing through, not blinding, not triumphant, just steady. The kind of light you earn. And for the first time in years, Jason allowed himself to cry, not from guilt or rage, but from love. Summer had settled over Nevada like a warm sigh. The desert shimmered beneath a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. And Highway 19 stretched ahead, long, empty, familiar. 6 months had passed since the night the desert turned red, and time, like sand, had done what it always does. It covered wounds, but it never quite erased them. The Iron Saints rode in silence that morning, their engines softer than usual, as if the road itself demanded reverence. Jason Mitchell led the line, his face shaded by the brim of a weathered cap instead of his usual helmet. His hair had grown longer, streaked with gray that the sun made silver. The lines around his eyes had deepened, but so had the calm within them. He looked older, but not weaker, like a man who had finally accepted that every scar is a story, and some stories aren't meant to heal. The patch on his jacket, a new one, bore a single addition under the Iron Saints emblem. A small stitched paw print, dark and subtle. Behind him rode Sarah Torres, her flame-red scarf trailing behind her like a ribbon of memory. The summer light softened her edges. She looked less like a fighter and more like a survivor. The fire inside her hadn't died. It had simply found gentler things to warm. She'd gone back to volunteering with search and rescue, using her bike to reach lost hikers in the desert. Sometimes she swore she could still hear a faint bark in the wind guiding her. Vic Ramirez rode last, his bike newly restored but still scarred with the bullet dents from that night. He had gained weight, his beard fuller and peppered with white. But his laughter had returned, deep, rumbling, alive. He had left the cigarette habit for good after promising Rook's memory he'd live long enough to tell the stories. Vic didn't talk about faith much, but he carried a small metal cross in his pocket now, a gift from Jason he pretended to forget about, but always kept close. They turned off the highway onto a dirt path, marked by a wooden post with faded paint. The air shimmered with heat, and the desert buzzed with cicadas. At the edge of a low ridge, a small monument stood, simple, unassuming, carved from gray stone. The engraving was deep but tender. Rook, the dog who stood between darkness and the lost. A metal tag, once attached to his collar, hung from a chain around the stone, glinting faintly in the light. A lone car waited nearby, dust rising in soft spirals from its tires. From it stepped Lily, now 17, though her eyes carried the weight of someone far older. Her auburn hair was clean, trimmed to her shoulders, her skin, once pale from fear, now bronzed by sunlight. She wore a simple white dress and held a bouquet of wild daisies and desert marigolds, bright, defiant colors against the muted sand. Jason dismounted first, his boots sinking slightly into the dust. When Lily saw him, her face broke into a hesitant smile, the kind of smile that trembles between joy and ache. "You kept your promise?" she said softly. He nodded. "Always." Lily knelt by the stone, brushing the dust off the carved letters with her fingers. "I found this on my walk last week," she said, holding up one of Rook's old tags, the military K9 ID plate Jason thought he'd lost during the chaos. It washed up near the creek after the rain. Jason took it carefully, turning it over in his hand. The letters were worn, but still legible. Rook, K9, USMC. He traced them slowly with his thumb, as if memorizing the feel of loyalty etched in metal. "I didn't think he'd ever rest," Lily continued, "but maybe now he can." Sarah crouched beside her, placing the flowers on the grave. "He never wanted rest," she said with a faint smile. "He just wanted to keep watching over us." Lily's eyes shimmered as she looked up at them. "He didn't just save me. He saved what I thought people were capable of." Her voice cracked, tears catching on her lashes, but her smile stayed. "I thought the world was just bad people doing bad things, but that night, you all proved me wrong." Jason didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted toward the horizon, the endless stretch of road where sand met sky. The desert was quiet except for the faint hum of wind, and in that silence he felt something shift, a presence, soft but certain. The kind of quiet that feels like being watched by something good. He knelt beside the stone, placing Rook's ID tag next to it. "You earned your place here, boy," he said. "You made sure we all found ours." The sun had climbed higher, heat shimmering off the chrome of their bikes. Sarah handed Jason a flask. He took a sip, grimaced, then smiled faintly. "Still tastes like jet fuel," he muttered. Vic chuckled. "Tradition." They poured a few drops of the whiskey over the earth by the stone, an old biker's ritual, half blessing, half toast. The liquid sank into the ground quickly, vanishing as if accepted by something below. Jason stood, stretching his stiff shoulders. He'd hate all this fuss, he said, glancing around. Would have just barked once and told us to move on. Lily laughed quietly, wiping her tears. Then maybe we should. Sarah nodded. That's what he'd want. Keep riding. Keep finding lost souls. For a long moment, none of them moved. The wind rose, carrying dust and the faint scent of sage. Then Jason reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small metal plaque. He screwed it into the back of the stone, the sound of the drill sharp in the stillness. When he stepped back, the words caught the sunlight. No greater love hath any creature than this, to stand between the darkness and those who cannot fight it. Lily read it aloud, her voice steady now. He really was a saint, she whispered. Jason put a hand on her shoulder. He still is. They stood together for a while longer, the four of them, a soldier, a firefighter, a mechanic, and a girl who'd once been lost, all bound by the memory of a dog who had given them back their purpose. When the time came to leave, Lily lingered behind. She knelt one last time, touching the stone, her whisper carried away by the wind. Goodbye, Rook. Thank you for teaching me what courage looks like. She stood and joined the others by their bikes. Jason started his Harley, the familiar rumble filling the silence. The others followed. As they pulled back onto Highway 19, the sound of engines rose, not mournful, but proud. In the rearview mirror, the small memorial shrank into a silver dot against the sand. But for an instant, Jason thought he saw movement beside it, a flicker of gray fur, a shape running alongside the bikes before fading into the glare. He didn't look twice. Some things didn't need to be seen to be believed. He smiled beneath the desert sun, whispered under the roar of the wind, "Ride on, buddy." The road stretched ahead, endless, waiting, and the Iron Saints rode into it, leaving behind dust, echoes, and a legend carved in stone. The morning sun rose over the desert like a slow, golden tide, washing the ridges and dunes in light. The sky was an endless blue, vast and forgiving, and Highway 19 glimmered like a steel ribbon stretching toward forever. The air was warm, but not harsh, the kind of morning that promised new beginnings rather than endings. Jason Mitchell tightened the strap of his weathered gloves and kicked the ignition. The Harley responded with a growl deep enough to shake the sand, steady enough to sound like a heartbeat. Behind him, the Iron Saints lined up in silence, their shadows long and lean across the asphalt. Sarah Torres adjusted her goggles, the wind teasing loose strands of her dark hair. She'd traded her red scarf for a faded denim one that once belonged to her brother, a firefighter who hadn't made it out of the blaze in '09. Every time the wind caught it, she smiled, not because she missed the past less, but because she'd learned to carry it without burning. She looked over to Vic Ramirez, who was strapping a small metal box to the back of his bike. Rook's old collar, sealed in resin, now carried as their guardian emblem. Vic's face was broader now, the kind of face carved by laughter and hard labor. His beard had gone white around the edges, and his dark eyes had softened with the kind of wisdom that comes only after burying friends and fixing what can't be fixed. He still swore too much and drank too little, but he'd become the heart of their little convoy, a man who didn't say much, but made sure every ride felt like family. Jason scanned the horizon before pulling his helmet on. His hair had turned silver at the temples, and the desert light caught it like frost. Age had sculpted him into something steadier, almost mythic. The lines of his face like etchings of every mile he'd ridden, every life he'd saved, every ghost he'd forgiven but not forgotten. The engines came alive in unison, a low chorus of power, faith, and something almost holy. Dust lifted around them as they rolled out onto the highway, and the wind met them head-on. It was Sarah who noticed it first. "Jason," she called over the radio, her voice laced with surprise and warmth. He glanced at the side mirror. From behind them, through the mirage of heat and sunlight, a small figure was running along the road. Fast, determined. A young German shepherd, lean and strong, its coat a familiar shade of silver gray with streaks of sable along its spine. Its eyes, bright, amber, alive, mirrored the same fierce loyalty he'd once known. The pup darted alongside the line of bikes, keeping pace with uncanny precision. Dust swirled around its paws, but it didn't falter. Jason slowed slightly, letting it come closer. The dog lifted its head, tongue lolling, tail swaying, not begging for attention, not afraid, just running with them, running home. Sarah laughed, a sound that cut through the wind like sunlight breaking cloud. "Looks like the saint isn't done with us." Vic grinned beneath his helmet. "Damn right. You can't keep a good dog from the open road." Jason didn't speak. He just watched the animal through the mirror. That same gait, that same drive, that same spark. His chest ached, but not from grief, from gratitude. He felt Rook there, in the rhythm of the bike, in the sound of the wind, in the endless stretch of sky. They rode on for miles. The desert began to change. Sagebrush giving way to wildflowers, the barren sand dotted now with color. It was late summer, and the land was healing, stubborn and beautiful, the way all wounded things eventually learn to be. At a fuel stop along the way, a lonely roadside diner painted in peeling turquoise, they parked and rested. The pup had followed them the whole time, settling in the shade beside Jason's bike, panting, but with eyes sharp and alert. From the diner came a man in his 60s, heavy-set, wearing a white apron stained with grease. His name tag read Earl. His gray mustache twitched into a smile as he wiped his hands on a rag. "That your dog?" he asked. Jason looked at the pup, who was now sprawled out beside his boot like he'd always belonged there. "Not mine," Jason said. "But he seems to think otherwise." Earl chuckled. "Strays pick good company. Smart ones always do." He looked at the bikes, the dust, the old leather jackets. "You folks riding far?" Jason nodded. "As far as the road takes us." Earl leaned on the counter, eyes distant. "Used to ride myself, Army recon. Got busted up in Kuwait, traded my throttle for a spatula." He grinned faintly. "Never stops calling, though. The road, I mean." Jason's expression softened. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It never does." They ate breakfast, coffee black as midnight, eggs overdone, toast like cardboard. Somehow it tasted perfect. Sarah teased Vic for using too much hot sauce, and Vic retaliated by threatening to adopt the puppy and name it Biker. The pup barked once, as if approving. Even Earl laughed, shaking his head. When it was time to go, Jason bent down and looked at the shepherd. "Well, kid," he said, voice low and steady, "you've got the eyes of someone who doesn't quit." The pup wagged his tail. Jason took a strip of leather from his saddlebag, an old piece from Rook's harness, and tied it loosely around the pup's neck. "Then you ride with us," he said. "Name's Halo." Sarah smiled. Fitting. Every saint needs a halo. The dog barked again, once, sharp, clear, certain. As the saints rolled back onto the road, the world seemed brighter. The air hummed with heat and memory. Jason looked into his side mirror one more time. Not for ghosts this time, but for proof that they'd left something good behind. The diner faded into the distance. The highway opened, wide, and the horizon beckoned like a promise. They rode through the canyons of red rock, through towns that remembered their names, through miles of silence that no longer felt lonely. Lily's voice came over the radio once. She'd stayed behind in her new home. but she checked in now and then. "You guys still chasing sunsets?" Jason smiled. Someone's got to keep the road honest. By late afternoon, the light turned gold again, the same gold that had once fallen on Rook's grave, the same light that now wrapped around Halo's fur as he ran beside them. The road stretched endlessly ahead, but for the first time in a long while, Jason didn't see it as a burden or a penance. It was freedom, a ribbon leading home. He looked at Sarah and Vic riding ahead, the pup darting between their bikes, and felt the weight lift, not gone, but gentler now, transformed into something almost sacred. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the asphalt. Jason took a deep breath, the scent of sage and gasoline mixing with memory. Then, almost to himself, he said, "Not every rider's a wanderer. Some of us just follow the light." The engines answered with a roar, a hymn of thunder rolling across the desert. Dust rose behind them, swirling in the fading sun as the Iron Saints disappeared into the horizon, their silhouettes framed by the dying light, chasing the promise of another dawn. And beside them, keeping perfect pace, ran a silver-gray shepherd, head high, eyes bright, the eternal echo of a saint who never truly left. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or light. They come quietly, in the shape of a loyal heart, a helping hand, or a road that leads us back to grace. The story of Jason, Rook, and the Iron Saints reminds us that faith isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up when the world needs light. In every act of courage, in every moment of kindness, God leaves his fingerprints, waiting for us to notice. So if this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that even in the darkest deserts, his light still finds a way through. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and may God bless you and your loved ones on every mile of your journey.